Bing bong. I am live with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast. But first, I'd like to thank MyNode because MyNode is helping me set up podcasting 2.0. So if you're on Fountain Breeze or any of those wallet or podcasting apps, feel free to stream me on there, send me sats or do whatever. And it's all thanks to MyNode. So if you're looking for a Bitcoin node and want to run your own, they have hardware and software. You can buy it all put together, or you can buy just the pieces and put it together yourself. And they have great, easy to use software. So if you're looking to get into running your own Bitcoin node, go ahead and check out MyNode. And now I have a very special guest, Thomas Johns, who's sitting here in the waiting room. Now here he is. Thomas, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on, Brandon. I want everybody out there to make sure they like and subscribe to Mr. Brandon Green Candle Lit. But yeah, thanks for having me on the show. It's awesome to be here. I just really can't wait to get started.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited to have you here. So, I mean, you have like a really interesting background, and but first, let's get into Moonbase 5. So, I heard you on another podcast, but I'm still kind of, I'm not really sure like what all Moonbase does. Yeah. So explain it to me like I'm a third grader. I have no idea anything about Bitcoin. And just
where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Austin, Texas. So from
you familiar with layaway?
Layaway? No, I am not.
You familiar with buy now, pay later?
Yes.
So Moonbase 5, one of the initial products we're doing is buy now, pay later for Bitcoin. So let's say you want $1,000 worth of Bitcoin. You could reserve the Bitcoin on our system, pay monthly, say $100 per month over X amount of time. And then after you finish paying off those payments, then you get the Bitcoin. We can put it in a multi-sig wallet or whatnot. But the real goal of that was you see people like Michael Saylor, he's able to get loans to buy Bitcoin. Well, the average person can't really do that, but I want everybody to be Michael Saylor. They may not be able to do it at Michael Saylor's level, but everybody can do it, mini Michael.
There we go. That's awesome. So, all right, everybody check out Moonbase 5. I'm sold right there. That's like incredible, because that's like one problem I'm running into is like, all right, I'm running all out of fiat, and now I want to buy more Bitcoin at these prices, and the fiat's just not rolling in quick enough to buy as much as you want. So,
and you don't have to put up your Bitcoin onto, say, something like BlockFi, which is having some issues. Because really the most that people put their Bitcoin up is so they can buy more Bitcoin. And I didn't want myself to have to keep on putting up my Bitcoin. So yeah, come check us out, and would love to have you. I really want to build a community of people, not just people who want Bitcoin, but people who want, self-sovereignty, want to build their own governments, want to build their own communities.
I love that mission, man. And I love everything about it. So, I mean, that was just one question that I was like itching to ask, because I'm like, all right, this sounds like it sounds like, you sound like brilliant, and you sound very promising and everything like that. And I like all the stuff that you're doing. I like all the stuff going on at Pleb Lab in Austin. I just needed to know right off the bat, what is all this commotion about? But let's bring it back a little bit. So who is Thomas Johns, and like, how did you find Bitcoin? What's the orange pill story? Did you like go down the rabbit hole early, or, how did you end up finding this, funny internet money?
Yeah, so I did not go down the rabbit hole early. I was one of those people, like a lot of people who knew about Bitcoin early and were just like, I was doing other things. I was working on other startups. But one of the things that brought me to Bitcoin was I was building this analytics device, or basically, how do I say, GDP alternative. So looking at measurements to track GDP in a way that was actually responsible. One thing about GDP that people don't know is created by this Simon Kuznets, this Russo-American immigrant, I think he was Russian. But one thing he says, whatever you do not measure the wealth, the health of a country using this measure. And that's exactly what everyone did. But it's really not really good for that. But while I was making those measurements, I was like, why is it the US dollar like crumbling? And during that, I got the idea of I wanted to make an asymmetric bet that the US dollar should actually be crumbling, and Bitcoin was the best way to do that. And then I saw Michael Saylor do it, and I also wanted to copy him, because I don't know if you're familiar with how might be a boogeyman name, but George Soros broke the Bank of England. He did it essentially the same way that Michael Saylor is doing. He took out a huge amount of loans in the British currency. I think it was the pound or something else. Transferred it into francs, which was a stronger, German, some German currency, which was a stronger currency, and then paid it back in this now devalued currency. So when I saw Michael Saylor do that, I was like, oh, he's doing a speculative attack similar to my man George over there. So I was like, yeah, how could I do something that is, I guess, similar, but it also feels somewhat bad. You often hear where people will say that if you support Bitcoin, you don't support the American government. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of like this interesting, kind of place that we're in. I don't think it's like, not, in my opinion, it's not really against American values, right? Because America is supposed to be like land of the free, right? The free and open. Like, America's been very great for entrepreneurs, and in my opinion, my dad is a small business owner, and I know like quite a few small business owners, and that's where I think that Bitcoin can help the most, right? Is like a lot of these, especially like right now during a very inflationary time, like,
Mhm.
with the invention of Lightning and other things, like you can use that to kind of undercut that 3% fee. And I actually heard the other day when I was trying to go and orange pill this guy at a brewery. He said that American Express charges 7% fees. So it's like, these companies charge these large fees, but like, what can a merchant do? And it's like, okay, well, I can accept even dollars over the Lightning Network for 1% or lower fees. And I think, these small businesses have definitely been hurting really badly with all these shutdowns and
Inflation.
everything else, and inflation increasing costs, and they don't really want to increase their cost of their burgers, food, beers, whatever, because these big companies, they have that, like, if they increase it, they don't have to increase it quite by the margin that these smaller guys do, because they sell more, right? So I think, like, Bitcoin in the end is like really actually one of the more American things that you can support, because it's helping support small businesses, it's helping support freedom of the people, and just like overall, like all those things. So I hear them when it's like, okay, maybe you're like against the American government, but I think like the
Mhm.
true American values is like land of the free, right? So I think it's people kind of got it backwards, and I think it's kind of like the narrative is like a little flipped, where it's like, all right, if you're going against the government, that's un-American, when in reality, America started by rebelling against the British government. So uh yeah, I mean, do we go back to the original core values, or are we kind of like, at the values now? I don't really know.
That's a good point, and I think one of the things you're talking about, the American core values, and how Bitcoin really uh, encapsulates those core values. One of the things that I love about America is that it is able to evolve, and I think that Bitcoin represents an evolution. And a lot of times, we say that Bitcoin is a revolution, but I don't like to go that way, because oftentimes revolutions end up in the same place. And I think Bitcoin, actually, we can evolve the way we are governing in a way that more aligns with the values of both the people and everybody else.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's bring it back a little bit to like, I know we kind of got off the rails here with your orange
Mhm.
pill story, but do you think that there's something that maybe back in your past, or some interaction that you had that kind of made you more inclined to, gravitate towards Bitcoin? Is there something like, maybe, you're more like tech focused, or, maybe, I guess anti-establishment or something like that like maybe like Bitcoin really clicked for you? Or did you just kind of have like that aha moment when you saw Michael Saylor going through and doing all that?
Yeah. So one, I am my background in school, I majored in electrical engineering. So I was an electrical engineer, but I was also like the resident asshole and rebel. So one of my friends is like, Thomas walks around like he owns the place. One story is like, I I got like Rene Descartes. I read that book, one of his books. I think it was Meditations, and I don't know, maybe that was it. And I remember how he said he wanted to like forget everything that he learned and relearn everything. So I did that in school. So I told all my teachers, you know, forget classes, forget your grades. All I care about understanding. And so I ended up not turning in any homework and failing every test, but they all passed me because they like you're the only one who understands. And so like I really took that approach to like trying to understand things deeply. Like every time I have a question, I have a project. So I've always taken somewhat of a contrarian approach. Uh, in high school, I listened to a lot of Lupe Fiasco, which was very like at the time very kind of like anarchist in a ways. And I don't call myself an anarchist now. I think now more of a, I guess, a cybernetist. I don't I don't really hear that term being brought up about. It's not quite a cyberpunk. I don't have like this dystopian view of the world, but I do have that like I think systems and functions can actually be more equitable in governing how we move throughout the world in our society. So that's that's really what sparked my eyes, that I saw Bitcoin as this way to, how I say, evolve how we're actually governing. And if you look at signals and systems, uh, Bitcoin is one of the things where you actually can have a signal to noise ratio that's super high, almost perfect. Um, and you can't do that with other types of money. And that's something that also really, really excited me, because now I believe we can use this new type of money to build a government system that is very similar to how we build the difficulty function. It's a system that has a target in mind, but is constantly adjusting. And that's what we need as the world is changing so exponentially fast.
That's awesome stuff, man. I really enjoy that. I mean, just the way you put things is really eloquent, and the way you go down and explain it, and your thought process through everything is awesome. So,
I appreciate
let's get into your book. So, you're the
it. Mhm.
author of Spiral Dynamics. What is that all about? And
So
how did
Spiral,
it? Yeah, go ahead.
how did that happen? Sorry about that. Yeah, Spiral Dynamics in Action. It's a book that I co-authored with Don Beck, who helped FW de Klerk, Nelson Mandela uh, transition through apartheid, and then also Sergey Soliman, who made like the Russian version of PayPal, endorsed by John Mackey and whatnot. And Spiral Dynamics is a pop version of this theory by this guy named uh, Graves at Union College, who was a contemporary of Maslow. So this is something called like humanistic psychology. And if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, uh, so that top level is self-actualization. But essentially, this guy's theory was that societies and individuals tend to evolve or to change based off of their surroundings and their environments in a way that alternates between self-sacrifice and self-expression, or collectivism and individualism. And it changes in complexity based off of the number of problems that they've actually solved. So the technology that they have essentially creates this new sort of complexity that they have. So we wrote that book, and that book, Spiral Dynamics in Action, it's a great book, but it's very academic. I wanted it to be this field manual, but we didn't quite get there. But another great book in that film in that area is this book called Reinventing Organizations, which I don't fully agree with how it ends, but it's a great book. I don't know if you're familiar with he just passed away, but Tony Hsieh at Zappos. So he had this thing called, they use this organizational philosophy called holacracy, which it was no bosses. So it's a bosses organization. What I do not like about how they did it, in my opinion, is that if the way they did it, if you don't believe what they believe, you have to get rid of people. So a lot of people ended up having to leave. In my viewpoint, I'm looking for systems that, what do you do when you can't get rid of people? So systems that are more along those lines is, how do we govern people when we can't get rid of people? And that's the difficult question.
Man, that's deep. So what brought you to write this book? Did somebody approach you, or to co-author it with them, or did you just want to have it and you sparked the idea and brought it to some of your co-authors and co-contributors?
No, so what happened was, my whole life has been like really this book, and my family desegregated large parts of Southeast Texas, and it was a big civil rights family. Like, we family was bombed, all kind of crazy stuff, just fighting that fight. And when my grandfather died, he said, you have to continue that legacy. And I felt like a lot of the laws in America were good, were at least, at least decent, but a lot of the things that we deal with today is the system itself. So I've been really thinking about how can I actually change the system. And when you look at the presidents and whatnot, it's not really, or if you look at any organization, it's really, you can change the people. Oftentimes the people don't change the system. That's two different things. That's two different types of changes. So I went into electrical engineering with that in mind, of learning about systems and how I could affect change in that way. And so when I found out about spiral dynamics, I was actually at this thing. I was invited to like Peter Thiel's what is it? He was doing this thing where he's giving out like 200,000 to kids and whatever, to drop out of school. I was invited to that. I didn't get in, but at that time I was doing a similar thing where I would give like a group of 10 kids $1,000, say, hey, let's build whatever you want to build, and I help them. But the goal was to teach them autonomy and just to learn about building bosses organizations, building different types of organizations. And one of the great things, one of the big stories from that was like, I had, third grade kids telling me, I want to solve gang violence. And then after they doing the research, they're like, this is really hard. And I was like, yes, that's the point. She's like, yeah. And so they were just learning and figuring out how to do stuff themselves. And that's really what I wanted to do. So that's how I ended up coming towards that book. And then also, when I went to that Peter Thiel thing, this guy introduced me to this book called Reinventing Organizations, which talked about it, I hired the people in the book. One of the guys was, I forget his name, but he worked at Morningstar Tomato, which is this huge tomato company, largest in the country, where they actually have a bosses organization. He then introduced me to this McKinsey consultant, who then said, okay, this is a bigger thing. And the guy that came up with the idea was a professor at my school that I had graduated. So it's this long roundabout circle that got me to actually write in that book.
Gotcha. Well, you've done some other amazing things too. Like, I believe you've spoke at the UN. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we spoke at the United Nations. I spoke to a bunch of high net worth families. So ultra high net worth families. So these are like Rockefeller families and stuff like that. And on large scale organizational change. And that was interesting. It was also very scary for me when I did it. Because what's interesting about these families is that they're just as lost as we are. And I was just like, what is this? Okay, you guys are having the same issues. Okay, wow. So that was very interesting. They have the same issues, but just on a different scale. So
Yeah. So how did you even get that opportunity? Like, was it just through like, I don't know, word of mouth or something? And somebody was like, yeah, like, you'd be a good fit to speak there, or, how did that even come about?
yeah, that's a good question. It's because I wrote that book essentially. And so when I wrote that book, one of the guys who endorsed it was John Mackey, and so people were John Mackey created Whole Foods, and people were just really were inviting me to a lot of things at that point. The person that invited me to that, their family started a large scale, uh, how do I say, grocery business here in the U.S. So yeah, this I just got invited to like weird places. And I just go on adventures now.
Hey, man, that's the way to do it, though.
Yeah.
And then Justin was also telling me, so we got introduced by Justin from
Uh-huh.
the Huntsville Bitcoin meetup. So shout out to
Mhm.
Justin and Huntsville Bitcoin. But he also told me that you recently won a like Plebify Hackathon in LA. Is that right? Or does he have that wrong?
Won that hackathon with a quick thing that we built. Basically, it's just giving out sats to everybody who retweets the tweet. I actually was gonna show it off in a like a little screen. I wonder if I can share my screen. Hold on. Uh let's see.
Might be able to.
I think I might be able to. Let's see.
Here
Can
we
you
go.
see
Maybe
that?
I could go like this. There we
Yeah,
go.
so if you scan that link, it'll send you to retweet. And as you're retweeting that, it'll actually DM you and it'll DM you some sats and you can go from there. The big thing is I was trying to like get better at Twitter. I'm suck at social media, really. And I want to get a viral tweet. And I was like, what if I gave sats away? So this will DM you some sats and you can open it up in Moon using LNURL or Blue Wallet and get a few sats just to test the system. So if you would love to use this brand, and let me know if any other influencers, any other Twitter personalities want to try and grow their audience. Reach out to me. You can also use this system. And so yeah, built that, but like I've said, I'm trying to build community, and so I really want to reach out and help people who are also trying to build communities. So people who want to have a message and or need help getting it out, like myself.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff, man. So, I mean, you're doing all this great work for, the Bitcoin community with Moonbase 5, the Pleb Lab stuff, and
Mhm.
this. So, the one thing I really love about the Bitcoin community is I feel like everybody that, kind of goes down the rabbit hole and gets into Bitcoin is really embodies the proof of work that Bitcoin embodies. So, like, what kind of drives you to, go through it and really help the Bitcoin community and do all this kind of work? Are you just like passionate about this stuff? Like, why are you so excited to wake up about and do stuff for Bitcoin every single day?
I'm gonna answer that question. This is like what drives anyone? Childhood trauma. Uh, Uh, so yeah, so yeah, just the passions. I feel like an anime character a lot of times. It's obsessive for me. Like working is obsessive. I'm just always have to create something. I always have to create something. I always feel like I have to be working to help people. I don't like asking people for anything. And that's why I just like try to just give out as much value as I can and create things as fast as I can. It's like, here's some value, here's some value, here's some value. And if you want to give value back, thanks. But I'm so terrible at it. So like when I first started out entrepreneurship, all I did was drive around helping people all the time and not asking anything. And which is like a dumb way to start out entrepreneurship. Um, but yeah, so like that's really what drives me is that passion. And I really do. I feel like I'm a very empathetic person. I hate seeing people struggle and I hate seeing people, in pain or just can't get their dreams out. I love helping people strive to get their dreams out. And so yeah, that's really what drives me.
That's awesome stuff, man. I really enjoy that message, and like all that stuff you're doing is amazing. So, You know, everybody that you know, sees that QR code, be sure to scan it and retweet that to get some sats. But let's get into some stories. So there's been a lot that's happened this week. So it's a jam-packed week for all these stories. So the first thing that we're going to get into is essentially like the plebs are just going at all these influencers for you know, influence or for getting sponsored and kind of maybe selling out, maybe not selling out, depends how you look at it. But you know, people are going at Nick Carter, Pomp, Preston Pish, Peter McCormick, and it seems like almost every single one, Bitcoin maxis on Twitter are kind of going at them. Honestly, I kind of feel for some of them because you know, when you get these sponsorship opportunities, you don't really have any influence on the company, right? They are your partners in a sense, but like you don't get to make any decisions on the company. So if they sell you, you know, and then they change down the line, it's either you have to like end that contract or do something too. So granted, I think like a lot of them deserve criticism, but I think it's they're in a between a rock and a hard place, you know, because it's like, well, something's got to pay the bills. And usually these crypto places are maybe offering up a little bit more money, but you know, I think like the ones that didn't like necessarily sell out and kind of like stayed with their true like Bitcoin only core values are the ones that are going to make it through, and the ones that just like, you know, crappy companies that we'll kind of get into later. But what is your opinion on all the plebs kind of going at all these influencers and everything for kind of maybe getting sponsored or selling out by a lot of these like shitcoin companies?
I believe it's a sign of a healthy community. So like the Bitcoin community is so strong, and its core values are like they believe them so strongly that anyone who really just goes against those core values or what they see, they're going to call them out. And the sign of a healthy of a strong community. I won't say necessarily healthy, but what this could also end up leading to is like a fracturing in the community. And so right now we're having this question of what is a Bitcoin maxi, and you see it playing out on Twitter as people talk about, you know, Nick Carter and what's it, Preston Pish and all of it. You know, you're not a real maxi. You know, it's like you're not a true believer. You know, you have lost the way, Anakin. You know, you've gone to the dark side, and so uh, it's interesting to see. Like, I'm like, okay, here's some popcorn. I'm watching. But this is also what I think any large community goes through. It goes through this fracturing. So what are we going to do to make these sort of new groups and also to continue on? How are we going to evolve as a group is the question.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like, you know, influencers from now on are going to kind of be more cautious on who they take on as a, you know, as a sponsor. And I think that's like probably the best response that we can get, right? Is like,
Yeah.
all right, you know, they really take a look at their values, and then, you know, it's not just all talk then, because they know like Bitcoin Twitter and all their followers will really call them out if they get sponsored by, you know, one of these shitcoin companies that kind of goes off the rocker and kind of promotes some of these, you know, shit. And so I think like, you know, we'll kind of get into some of the stories later about some of these companies failing, but it shows that, you know, that these companies that are run well and like really sticking true to like the Bitcoin core values are the ones that are, you know, going to prosper. And I think from there, you know, that's the ones where that, you know, they'll work with the influencers, and those are the ones that will be successful as long as, you know, people don't, you know, maybe go sell out. I know that's like really, I mean, it's easy to say from
It's
here,
easy
you
to say, yeah.
know, and
Before you've had a chance to sell, you know, it's kind of like it's like you're in a rock and, like you were saying before, you're in a rock and a hard place because you gotta eat too. So you're like, oh well, you know, I gotta eat. So it's like, what do you do if you're the person that's, let's say let's say you're just starting out as a media person or voice in the Bitcoin community, and someone comes to you and says, will you shill, you know, this product, and it looks like a good product like you're saying before, and you shill it, and then you get into the technical details with what's going on, and you're like, oh no, this is not. So, what do you do? Because your people, the plebs going to turn. So it's like you said, it's a hard thing. I think what we're going to see is not only people being more cautious. Well, the older people are going to be more cautious. The people that be in the space longer, one, because they can afford to be more cautious. Two, they also have the Bitcoin to be more cautious and whatnot, and they've seen the blowback. But the newer people, they aren't going to, when this next crop, let's say the 2024 or 2023 crop, when they come up, the new ones, they're not going to be as cautious because they're going to be newer to the game. They haven't seen these wars that's going on. So I think what's going to happen also is that a lot of Bitcoiners are going to be less sponsorship focused in general, so that they can stay in their core values. Because the same thing that the Bitcoin media influencers have, these quote unquote Bitcoin companies have that problem too, because they accept money from VCs who made such and such and such. Their values may not align with the company's values, and they may be pressuring them to do X, Y, and Z, and then they're like, "Oh, I have to do this so I can continue to exist." So it's like it's a trade-off between trying to run fast and run safely. Like, how do you run safely?
Yeah, and I mean, like, too, like, I think everybody kind of in the age of Twitter and podcasts and everything, like, there's always going to be something that somebody says, like, where maybe they don't have like the full knowledge, or maybe they tweeted out something like not negative about a certain company. So like I think that all of it kind of like started back, or at least the first big person that I started kind of going at people was Corey of Swan.
Yeah.
I mean, he called out Celsius, which was good.
A long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he started doing that, but like, that like I mean, he has like positive tweets about not necessarily positive, but he said, if you're gonna stake your coins, you do it on like Ledin and BlockFi, and like maybe he named like one other. And so obviously like, it doesn't look good that he said that about BlockFi, in the position that they are now. But when he tweeted that, he probably didn't know. So it's like, it's just like, I think like all these, the Bitcoin, influencers, whatever you want to call them, like I think there's a group of them that really do mean well and like are really fighting like the true cause for Bitcoin. But it's just, when you're in the public eye, it's hard to always be like, perfect and beloved. I think it's like, when you get to a certain point, everybody kind of wants to tear you down a little bit. And so once you show a little crack in the armor, it's like game over.
You just got to keep producing. Make more stuff. You saw when Kobe Bryant was having issues, what he did? Go out there, play basketball harder. They just need to ball harder. Shoot more shots.
Exactly. Go from 8 to 24, and then you're good.
Right. You're good. You need to drop 81 points.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so on that note, let's go into BlockFi. So there's been a lot that's been going on with BlockFi. So on June 16th, BlockFi and other crypto lending platforms were forced to liquidate a lot of positions because the venture firm 3 Arrow Capital was unable to meet their margin call on some of their Bitcoin borrowings. Thus, BlockFi fired 20% of its staff, and then it was followed by being fined by the state of Iowa nearly $1 million for violating the nation's Security Act. There's also been rumors now that FTX has bought them for very, very cheap.
Million.
Yeah, 25 million, where I think they were valued over, $1 billion or multiple $1 billion previously. And I think it was like a 99% drop in valuation. So, I'm not necessarily a numbers guy, but 99 out of 100 sounds like a lot. Yeah, exactly. So, BlockFi, like, what do you think about these like crypto like lending platforms? Because like, for maybe somebody coming in who doesn't really necessarily know much about Bitcoin, it sounds appealing, right? These platforms offer yield on your Bitcoin, which is an appreciating asset by all aspects, if you zoom out far enough. And you get a yield back where it's like, okay, well, maybe this is like my Bitcoin savings account. But you know, in the end, it's proving to not really be super sustainable. So how do you kind of feel about these platforms, like maybe bringing in some plebs, and then, you know, kind of where it's at now?
Yeah, they're bringing in people who are trying to live. Like, these are people, they're putting up their coins on the BlockFi or whatever, getting some coins, you know, some money back so that they can live on without having to sell their Bitcoin, but they get liquidated. It feels terrible. Like, it feels absolutely terrible. And you thought BlockFi in general, you're like, okay, these are the good guys. I feel like a lot of people feel like they were the good guys. They were in so many podcasts, so many people that we knew and trust had them on the show, and with tones that were overall supportive. Uh, and turns out that, you know, they were doing things in a way that wasn't fiduciary, you know, financially responsible. And I was like, all my coins. It's like, what do I do? Do I take it off? Do I try to get it off? You know, is FTX, please buy them. You know, it's like, I hope so. Well, shouts to FTX for buying everything up. They have all the coin.
Yeah, and I don't even know if that's like necessarily a good thing, because like, you know,
Right.
FTX is like another platform that kind of you know, is buying
It's
up everything.
everything.
Yeah, and so we can get into that too, because that's kind of like my one of the next stories is that FTX, obviously, you know, before we started recording, it was when I was looking through the stories, they were rumored that they're buying BlockFi, but it's been essentially confirmed on Twitter at this point. But you know, they're buying BlockFi. It's rumored that they're going to try to buy Robinhood as well. So it seems like, you know, I don't know where all of this money that FTX has, because right, they're like the sponsor of Major League Baseball. They have they're the sponsor of the Miami Heat arena. It's the FTX arena down there. I know they sponsor Tom Brady and some other major athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow I don't know where all this money is coming from. Where it's either they're spending a ton of money on marketing and like buying up all these companies, and they're kind of hoping that they buy up all these companies and they all like dry up. Um,
I
but
don't.
yeah, I don't know.
Sam Bankman-Fried, if you're familiar with him, is insanely good at arbitrage. He made like $1 billion in arbitrage already. So if he's using those skills, one thing's about people who are really good at arbitrage, they're very good at finding opportunities. Warren Buffett is another person that was extremely good at arbitrage. A lot of people think he was just completely compounding his money. Well, that's true, but it's also that he was doing a hell of a lot of arbitrage in the early days. It still does a lot of arbitrage with merger arbitrage. So if you looked at like the Activision, when Microsoft said that they were going to buy Activision, so he bought a bunch of Activision, knowing that it's going to convert into Microsoft. So people that are really good at arbitrage tend to be they know how to buy low, sell high. And so you see that with BlockFi. He's buying it for very low, and he's gonna get it up. So I do have some confidence in Sam Bankman-Fried. I know he has a bunch of shit coins, made Solana at the same time. But I think he's a good arbitrager. And I'm just like, for a lot of people, FTX is going to be the savior. You know, they have coins on there. So, you know, I hope it goes well. I hope it goes well. I hope that the money, because when he says it, FTX has money, they sell it from Alameda, which I actually think is Sam Bankman-Fried's company. So I think he's funding himself. So yeah, I I believe him when he says, you know, I think he got up on one Bitcoin Miami and said that they're going to be the largest exchange in the world. And with the pace that he's going, and if he's able to do it soundly and at these prices, it's going to be true. Because what he's buying from Robinhood and BlockFi is not just the users that they have, but also the regulatory clearances that they have. And there's a lot of products that you can't do on in America right now. And if he buys them, that you will. So it is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting too, because I mean, like Robinhood does offer crypto products, and now that they let you, take it off, which I think is an improvement for Robinhood. But
Oh, so you can take it off now. That's interesting.
yeah, so you can do that, which is good. But I know that they have like a limit. I think it's like 5 grand or something like that per day, like worth of whatever coin you have on there.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't recommend doing that, but it also allows people who may be coming in. And the one thing that I do like about Robinhood is that it is like, although it kind of gamifies like investing for newer users, I think like as far as like the UI UX goes, it's probably the best out of any of the apps, which brings on a lot of younger people who are trying to do it from their phone. And so it does give a lot of exposure to that. And at the end of the day, if it's FTX, like kind of getting, buying them up, it's going to be interesting because it's a lot of like now TradFi and, crypto kind of merging. And so it's like traditional finance and the new age finance are kind of coming together. And on that note too, like Goldman Sachs has been rumored to buy Celsius for like pennies on the dollar as well. And so, it's just kind of like we're at this interesting inflection point right now where a lot of these crypto companies that kind of had like poor business models but blew up really quickly because of the bull runs and everything else, they're being offered for cheap, and a lot of these TradFi companies are
Scooping them
getting
up.
kind of interested. Yeah, and so it's like, okay, well, initially it was all these Wall Streeters kind of saying like, Bitcoin's full of shit, and they never want to get on it. But now it's like, all right, these big companies are going to buy them. So it's more like, all right, don't look at what I say, look at what I do, kind of
Right.
thing. So it's interesting. I think we're kind of in a little inflection point here, and I think some of these bigger bankers are going to start to embrace Bitcoin and maybe crypto to a lesser extent. But I think it's slowly kind of coming along that way.
And I don't know if it's even slowly. I feel like it's about to happen all at once, because the big guys have been signaling Bitcoin for a while now. Like JP Morgan, I think Wells Fargo or Bank of America, one of them opened it up for their high net worth clients to buy Bitcoin on their platform. So it's so many people opening up, but they just opened it up for their high net worth clients. So they're basically saying on the back end line, we support it. We're just, being slow about it. And so, yeah, just TradFi. I think you're right. This inflection point is really amazing. And it's like I tell people, it's like, especially at Pleb, I feel like I am around when the internet's just beginning to take off. Like people are just now discovering AOL, And it's just like, oh, wow, this is amazing. It's just like, it's amazing to like be here to ride that wave. And it's just like 10 years, we're going to be able to like, oh, we were there,
Yeah, it's wild. And a lot of people make that kind of comparison to the internet and Bitcoin. And I know that's kind of, an easy comparison just because of like how quick both of them have boomed up. But,
yeah.
There's never been anything that's blown up to the size that Bitcoin has blown up in as little as time as it has. So, it's definitely something that's very, very interesting. And, both you and I see it as something that, can take over the world. And I think, we're getting to that point. And, yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think a lot of these businesses are going to start to integrate Bitcoin. And I think your point about the high net worth investors too is like, okay, well, these companies, the reason they offer it to high net worth investors is not because like, oh, we're just doing it for the high net worth investors because we want to do it. It's in my opinion, it's because the high net worth investors are demanding that, and they're asking about it because like those companies are going to do what those people want because they're like, okay, if you're not doing it for me, then I'm going to go to somebody else who's going to do it for me. And that's how they make a lot of their money. So, that's where I think it's all coming from. And, you know, this isn't in part of our stories, but I've kind of gone over it in previous weeks. Like a lot of these luxury brands like Gucci and some of these other ones are starting to accept Bitcoin as payment. And I think too, that's another thing where high net worth people are, you know, saying like, hey, I don't want to pay in dollars, or I don't want to convert my cash, you know, US dollars or euros or whatever to buy it over here or wherever I'm going.
Right.
They want to, you know, just pay in Bitcoin so they don't have to do that exchange rate or anything like that too. So I think like a lot of these high net worth individuals are starting to at least, you know, come around to it, but maybe they're just not as vocal like on Twitter or anything like that. You know, so I think it's definitely an interesting time for sure.
Yeah, well, it's not a lot of high net worth individuals on Twitter. I feel like,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
or the younger ones are on Twitter. It's not the older ones.
Yeah. And then on that note, so we kind of went over FTX and BlockFi,
Mhm.
but now we got to dive into Compass mining. So similar to BlockFi, there's been a lot of smoke around Compass mining.
For a
Uh,
while.
yeah, for a while. So first, the miners were seized that they had in Russia. Which why would you have you know, miners in, you know, a place where there's a lot of geopolitical uncertainty? I don't know. I don't run that business, but it didn't really seem like a great plan to me there. Then recently, they've eliminated their Discord server, which is kind of their connection to the community. You know, first, like I don't really think that's like kind of a sustainable model to have like a Discord server for everybody there. But like if you have it, I don't think it's a good look to definitely eliminate that. So there's that. And then it's been rumored that Compass has $1.2 million of unpaid energy cost. I saw Dennis Porter, who's a big crypto or Bitcoin influencer, has broken
Mhm.
his affiliation with there. And then recently, the CEO Whit Gibbs and CFO Jody Fisher have resigned. So there's been multiple Twitter spaces of Compass Mining kind of coming out and saying a whole lot of nothing. They do daily Twitter spaces, but you know, in their defense, the social media guys probably can't say much.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, what is all going on here? And it seems like in the Bitcoin community, it's kind of like, all right, well, the Bitcoin community was kind of raised on don't trust anybody. And then in the last bull run, all these companies were created and people started to trust some of these companies. And now some people are starting to get burned. So I wonder if plebs are basically going to go back and kind of revert to not trusting everybody, not trusting anybody. And then maybe it takes like the next bull run for like the newbies to get burned again, or if this is going to be kind of like a never ending cycle. I'm kind of interested to what you think about that. Like, do you think like everybody's going to kind of go back and just be like, you know, not your keys, not your coin. They're only going to trust like, you know, themselves essentially, or and like, and all these Bitcoin companies are just going to basically be like a means for getting their coins off of exchanges and everything else, and getting it for themselves. So yeah, how do you feel about like I guess the future of a lot of these Bitcoin companies when you know, it seems like it's trust is going to be hard to come by.
The ones that are going out of business, you should be calling up FTX right now. Uh, Compass Mining, call them up, let them know you got another business fire sale. I think it's interesting because a lot of people are comparing it to the bubble, the .com bubble. You can also compare it to music. So like you always hear your parents talk about, oh, the music in the 70s, best music ever. And if you really go look at the music in the 70s, they're just quoting like the 12 songs that were the biggest songs of, you know, the 70s. There was a whole lot of crap. And we're just alive during the crap right now of the Bitcoin. So there's going to be a few companies that were on sound foundations that keep on going, that time remembers, that we remember in the future. And but in general, most startups fail. Like everything in Bitcoin is a startup. Bitcoin's only existed for 10 years. 90% of startups fail. So or something like that. Maybe it's even more than 90%. So I actually appreciate the plebs and the Bitcoiners for trying to trust, because trust is how you build community. So, maybe trust a little bit, with a little less coins. So don't trust more than you're willing to lose. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm excited about who's going to still be around. Because the entrepreneurship journey is very interesting, and there's a lot of different ways to go about it. And I think the startup world has this they prioritize kind of a gold rush mentality where they're just going after go big or go home. And I don't think that way is sustainable for Bitcoin, because one, Bitcoin is so volatile right now. And then also, yeah, basically the Bitcoin is so volatile. So you really can't have that sort of gold rush mentality, because it might go down. It can go up to, 12 million and go down to a million, so I think we should start taking a slower approach that is much more focused on not who we can get money from, but how we can add value to people.
Yeah, and I agree with you there too. And I think although Compass had its faults and everything, it did solve a problem for people. Like
It's
I
a real
think,
problem.
yeah, I think eh, there's certain Bitcoiners, right? I think there's one level of Bitcoiners where they're only going to buy off exchanges. They're going to hold it on there because they don't trust themselves. And there's always going to be a place for exchanges. Now, I don't agree with that. And I think everybody should hold their own keys. But I also realize, my parents, for example, or some people who are maybe not technically savvy and who are used to having their money in their bank account and just kind of having it there. That's one section of a Bitcoiner. And then there's also going to be the next Bitcoiner that, okay, maybe they hold their own keys and they have a Bitcoin node, but they don't really want to have their own Bitcoin miner. And then there's going to be the last section of people who have it all. They have their own Bitcoin miner, they have their node, they're all that. They're all self-sovereign
Right.
and they're,
They have a
digitally.
cave.
Yeah, exactly. But I think too, for me, like I live in a duplex. I have it's 2 bedrooms. Like I can't really have an at-home miner here. I don't have like a garage I could store it in or anything like that with power. And so it's not really feasible for me right now, or it's not feasible for, maybe those young kids or, I'm calling them kids, but people my age, maybe a little bit younger who live in like apartments or something like that, to have this miner that's giving off a bunch of heat. And so having a company run it for them, or, maybe they're not as technically savvy, like maybe that's a good option. It's just, it's tough now where, I think like a lot of, like you said, like the startup world is tough because companies fail left and right, but these Bitcoin companies have blown up so quickly because of, the massive popularity of Bitcoin and just Bitcoin blowing up in general, that you've seen the volatile waves of Bitcoin companies as well as the volatile waves of Bitcoin price and USD. So I think these companies solve problems, and that's why they, blow up. But at the same time, they, although they solve problems, they also, weren't obviously like super healthy businesses. So it'll be an interesting time. I think like right now, bear markets are a great time to build. And so I hope like some more, well-run Bitcoin companies kind of come out of this, and the strong ones survive here, or get swallowed up by FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. Yeah, I think it's just going to be this kind of cycle where we're going to see more and more of these businesses pop up through this bear cycle, and maybe even a potential recession that we're kind of coming up on.
You're right. I guess we are. I think is a recession is technically 2 quarters in a row or something like that.
Yeah, so it's technically 2 quarters. Last quarter, we had a negative GDP growth, and the Atlanta Fed originally started this quarter with a prediction of 1.9 positive growth, and I think they've recently changed that to -1 So the Atlanta Fed is predicting that we're already in a recession, which I think like if you kind of go on even on Fin Twitter or Bitcoin Twitter, everybody kind of realizes like we're already there. So it's unfortunate, but I think it's like, a lot of great companies, and that's where Bitcoin was born out of, right? Like 2008, 2009. Without that crisis, maybe we wouldn't even really be sitting here with Bitcoin. So I think great inventions kind of come out of it. And so it's a great time to build and great time for these companies to kind of come up and figure it all out. So I'm really hopeful for the future, although it's like kind of an unfortunate time right now. And I know people are really feeling it too, because I, for one, am. So
I know. I like being in the Bitcoin world, and we've been saying, recession is going to come for a while. It feels terrible to see it coming in the same sense, because like people are hurting. People are, there's people on the other side of that dollar sign. So I want to say like for every 1% of inflation goes up, like a whole bunch of people become homeless, or basically, or something like that. I should look up that number. But yeah, it's rough, and I hope out of it. Well, I know out of it we're going to become a lot better entrepreneurs, a lot more self, actualizing or whatever. That's the good thing. But I hope the these social crises do not increase a lot more.
yeah, I agree with you there 100%. So on a maybe a little bit of a better note, Crypto.com has removed Doge and SHIBA rewards. So maybe moving away a little bit from shitcoins and kind of profiting off of that. So Crypto.com is a really popular exchange. As FTX is a sponsor of the Miami Heat arena, Crypto.com sponsors the Los Angeles Lakers NBA arena, formerly known as Staples Center. Obviously a big a big exchange with a lot of marketing dollars to sponsor the Lakers arena. But they also do like some things that BlockFi has done and that Celsius has done, and that they offer up to 14.5% on Tether, Polkadot, and some other shit coins. But I think a positive note is that they're removing Shiba, Doge, and 13 other shit coins as of Monday from their rewards program. So people can still hold them on the platform, but they won't earn rewards from them. So maybe it's like less enticing to purchase them. I don't know. But how do you feel about like kind of these exchanges maybe moving away, or realizing that they have to move away from a lot of these shit coins? Because I know like, Coinbase, although they offer and kind of market a lot of these shit coins, like majority of their profit has come from Bitcoin.
Yeah. Oh, Bitcoin.
Yeah, majority of their profits come from Bitcoin buying and selling. They just charge like an astronomical fee compared to like, a Strike or Cash App or some of these other ones where they charge like a very minimal fee to purchase. And so where I think the future is going is like a lot of these shitcoin companies or exchanges that offer these shitcoins, maybe they'll offer them, but they'll kind of realize like, hey, like Bitcoin is like the most popular one, and maybe they jump right in. Maybe I'm just hopeful and ignorant too, but I think the shitcoin business is a dying one. At least like this is kind of what it's showing. I don't know. What do you think about all of it?
This is a good. My thoughts on the shitcoins in general. So what I believe is going to happen is that you're going to start seeing consolidation in the shitcoin space as the price starts going down. So you're going to start seeing shitcoins merging, people shorting shitcoins, because essentially these are currencies that are pegged to different things. So you're going to start seeing a similar thing to what we're going to see in currencies, national currencies, but even more so in the shitcoin tree. So there's going to be somebody's going to find an opportunity there, but eventually what I think either those shitcoins go to zero, or they're going to be used to build on top of Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is the monetary like ability, and the shit coins are used to actually do the programming on. In a sense, very similar to how like basically gold is. So gold has pretty much no industrial value in my opinion. People say it's used in electronics, but it's like most of it's used in jewelry. Okay, jewelry and money. But things like platinum have a lot of industrial utility, and so or other things that do have industrial utility, they don't become the money, but they are used to build. So these things that do have a lot of industrial utility in the shitcoin world, I think will be used to build on Bitcoin. And I haven't fooled around with Taro yet, but it looks like that is a way that that's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you there. Like, I think, just building around Bitcoin is going to be the way. So, yeah, this isn't on the stories, but I'd be curious to what you think of like the whole like Web5 movement. So I don't know if you
What's
know.
Web5? What the heck is Web5? I thought we were Web3.
Yeah. So, well, Jack Dorsey, he basically has come out and said that he's building a company called TBD, which is like a kind of a subsidiary of Block, where they're going to be developing Web5. And I don't know if it's like a troll job on Web3, because like I can't tell if it's like serious or not, but they also have like job postings for it. So it makes me think that, okay, they're actually doing it, but essentially that they're kind of taking the like creator like earn off your data, like that kind of stuff mentality for Web3, and the ease of content creation of Web2, which is like what we're communicating on right now. Combining those two and make it Web5. Now the issue that I see with it is it's kind of like like right now, like, obviously AWS and like all these big companies, they have a lot of servers where you can store your data in the cloud and all that kind of stuff, where this would kind of make it where everybody has their own server and kind of stores their own data, and like companies pay for it as well. So in my opinion, I don't think like I don't really see like the use case for it, because like Web 2, which is where we're on right now, is just like so easy to use, and people right now just give up their data for whatever.
We don't care about our data. We don't.
Yeah. Nobody, like the average person doesn't really give a shit about it. And so I think, maybe there's the cyberpunks and all those people that'll care about it. But I think those are like few and far between. And like, are we going to have like a dedicated room now, or like an attic or a basement where it's, your server, your Bitcoin node, like all this kind of stuff, like in your house? Is that how like houses are going to be built in the future? I don't really know. Like, I don't.
Only rich people can afford that. House price is too damn high. Rich too damn high. Have a whole room for your server.
Yeah, exactly. So I just think, and that's being built on Bitcoin's protocol, or at least like that's what they're alleging that they're going to do. So I don't know if it's actually going to come to fruition, but I just think it's like kind of like one of those things too, where it's like it's interesting, because like a lot of these Bitcoin and like shitcoin company, or these shitcoin companies, they use the buzzword blockchain, and that they need to use this blockchain for X, Y, and Z. And like, a lot of like, I get approached every now and then by people who, want to say like, hey, we'd like to sponsor your stuff because we have this company that we do this with a blockchain. And my first question is to them every single time is like, what is a blockchain? Because if they can't describe that to me, then they can't really tell me like, what is the purpose of needing a blockchain for this. So I think like there's still kind of, a pretty big knowledge gap when it comes to like blockchain technology and like all that kind of stuff too. So I don't know. I think we're kind of coming to like an inflection point too, where it's like, the knowledge gap between like shit coinery and Bitcoin is kind of increasing. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. So with TBD, their thing is decentralized identity. So that could be interesting. But the thing about decentralization versus centralization, we've seen this in computers. And so like for instance, computers when it first came out, everything was mainframe. You had to rent space, rent time on a mainframe. You had to rent time on these servers, really, really large things. That gave way, to IBM. That gave way to the Mac, which was this new personalized, individualized, where everyone could have everything at their house. And then now we're back to putting everything on a mainframe, essentially. Uh, what ends up happening is what is the most convenient? If they can make decentralized the most convenient for the power, then people are going to use it. But if they can't make it more 10 times better than Web 2, to just gone on Facebook and Twitter, people aren't going to use it. But I think the decentralized identity is going to make how we do identity in governments and organization structure change. And so that's actually really powerful because you could have an identity that follows you wherever. It's really just, if you had a world government, if Bitcoin was to build some sort of global government, this decentralized identity would be a way to do that. Which I know as some people don't like those global government words, but yeah, that's kind of what could happen. A decentralized government.
I mean, it's just it's an interesting thought, and sometimes I feel myself going down that rabbit hole. Like, all right, what could happen if this scenario plays out? And I just get my own mind in a pretzel. So I don't know. But you mentioned, let's get into the last story. You mentioned Saylor earlier, how he kind of like, I guess maybe influenced you, or you saw like him kind of getting into Bitcoin, which made you kind of go down the rabbit hole. But I think it's not a true Bitcoin bear market unless he buys more Bitcoin. And what do you know? Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy announced, I think it was yesterday, that they bought $10 million worth of Bitcoin at a cost basis just under 21K. And now they hold just under 130,000 Bitcoin with the average cost of about 3,500 or 30,664 per coin. So say what you want about Saylor, but the guy has some serious convictions. So what are overall your thoughts about Michael Saylor and his space or his place in the Bitcoin space?
My thoughts about Michael Saylor. I'm jealous. Like I am absolutely jealous. I wish it's so you could no one else is able to do this. No one else is able to get as many coins. He's going to rule the world. Okay. There's going to be, SpaceX and Michael Saylor. So he's going to be the Michael Jordan of Bitcoin. I don't know what to say. It's like, it's unfair. People are going to be like, when they get old, well, Michael Saylor was able to get all these Bitcoins. Now we don't have any. What's really interesting is that, he's able to do this because he's a public company and he controls most of it. And that's just kind of the benefits of being a public company, even with all of this drawbacks. And he's also has this huge SaaS business. Someone on Twitter is like, yeah, he has a stream of SaaS. It's like, stream. He has the Mississippi River. It is a very big stream. So he's able to do this. And it's like, even if he can't, even if the Bitcoin price goes down, he can still service the debt with just his SaaS income. And I would love to build something like that. If I could, I think that's what we all should be doing, is using our SaaS income to buy Bitcoin. So all y'all listening, stop what you're doing and start a SaaS company.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if only it was that easy, right? But I mean, I think it's interesting too, because Michael Saylor, because he's in the public eye, I don't know if you see it necessarily, but I see it because I kind of have exposure to both like the FinTwit and the Bitcoin Twitter world, where he's pretty hated in the FinTwit community, and a lot of people want to see him fail, just because of how much conviction he has on Bitcoin. They think that the way he's running his public company, it doesn't do just to the investors and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's kind of interesting because for me, like, I don't think I would invest in and purchase MicroStrategy stock, just because like I hear Michael Saylor say a lot of things about Bitcoin. I never really hear him talk about his own personal company, like what they do or anything like that. And he's never really out there trying to, sell it or anything like that. And, the stock price kind of tracks Bitcoin price pretty similarly, at least from what I can tell. So, I think Bitcoiners are kind of behind him, but like, the retail investor or like the institutional stock investor isn't necessarily really behind him, which I think is kind of like an interesting, little place that he's in. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like every pleb should strive to have the conviction of Michael Saylor, because, it's one thing to put in, your life savings maybe, and you have like, I'm not trying to, downplay anybody's life savings, but say it's like a couple $1,000s into Bitcoin, where this man is like literally taking like $1 million worth of loans,
Billions.
and he's like pouring it all into Bitcoin. Like, that conviction level is just absolutely insane. And like, he's almost staking like his entire reputation, everything he's built on his entire life, on Bitcoin. And I think like, well, for one, it's great for the space to see somebody like that, because, you said like yourself, like it kind of helped bring you in. And I think like he helped bring some other people in, and it's like, okay, well, if this guy's doing it, then it's got to be, worth something, or something to look into at the very least. So I think it's kind of like this interesting spot that he's in, where it's like investors kind of hate him, and like maybe traditional FinTwit people kind of hate him, but like Bitcoiners love him. So
Everybody hates you when you're early. He's early, So right now they can hate him, but same with Michael Berry when he's he called out the stock market collapse of, what is that, 2008, the Great Recession. So when you're early, you're going to be hated. And you know what? How I say, if people don't hate you, you ain't doing anything. So
yeah, if you ain't got haters, you ain't popping, right?
You ain't popping. So he's out here. He's making. You know who else is hated? Michael Jordan. Okay, he's winning. Okay, they're just jealous.
Exactly. And what did Michael Jordan say in like The Last Dance? And he's like, people hated me because I was so competitive and they called me a tyrant. And he's like, no, you're a tyrant because you didn't win anything. I won. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's kind of how Michael Saylor's got to be looking at it, right? Like, it's like, I'm early, maybe he's at the Michael Jordan stage where, they're saying he's like, an NBA scoring champion, but he doesn't win anything yet. Like, it was before the first title. And then soon, like, he's going to start going on that run. And that's when everybody's going to kind of shut up. And I think like, now it's like I kind of mentioned before, it's like a bear market. And that's when kind of everybody just jumps in and loves to hate on Bitcoin. So I think like, like we've said at multiple times during this interview, is that it's kind of like an inflection point where shit coins are kind of falling. Maybe it's creating more Bitcoin maxis, and it's interesting because like shit coiners are kind of running scared, where Bitcoiners are kind of loving the opportunity to buy cheap shit, stocks. So
one more thing about Michael Saylor is also, he can have that conviction because I feel like he's gone through the whole entrepreneurial journey, and he knows he can do it. He can build it again. And so even if he fails, he knows he can do it again. This is not his first, championship. MicroStrategy is a championship already. He has the domains that he owns are championships. Like, he owns like a lot of the high level. I mean, he owned hope.com. So it's just like, this man is continually able to have the foresight to hop on these trends when they're early. It's similar to great arbitragers. So people who are really good at arbitrage, or how George Soros says, good at finding feedback loops, and he's really good at finding these feedback loops and riding them. So I know he can do it again. That's why he can have that conviction. So yeah, sorry for jumping in there.
No, that's a great point, and I really appreciate that point right there too. So, I want to be cautious with your time. So I feel like I could talk to you for hours. It's been a great conversation. It's been awesome. I'm gonna have to have you back on some point in the future, but we'll wrap it up with one last question. So, what makes you super bullish on the Bitcoin space going forward?
What makes me super bullish on the Bitcoin space going forward is people like you and people like me, because I'm about to go in there and go Jordan. I'm going all out, balls to the wall. So that's what I love about it. And no worries, we're gonna get it.
I love how you're making these NBA references and you didn't mention LeBron James once, because I'm a huge LeBron hater. So
I love LeBron. I love LeBron.
All right, we can't open
I can't come back on the show now.
Yeah. Invitation revoked. But Thomas, thank you so much for your time. Why don't you tell everybody where to find you and what all you got going on?
You can find me at Intense Thomas on Twitter. I'm trying to get my Twitter game up. Be sure and follow Brandon at Green Candle Lit. Also like and subscribe on all the socials. Moonbase 5 also. And if you want some free sats, just go to that QR code that was in the middle of this podcast, scan it, and bam. See you soon.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you so much, Thomas. Thanks for your time. And that is it for the State of Bitcoin podcast. Thanks for coming out.
No problem. Thanks for